ask you which of the two reactions you see on the left is a decomposition reaction, the tendency is to choose the rusting railroad car. And the reason why is it looks like it's breaking down. But if you think about it, what is rust? Rust is a combination of iron and oxygen, and so this is actually a synthesis reaction. And so if we ever take atoms and molecules and combine them together to make a new compound, then we've got a synthesis reaction. So what's an example of a decomposition? The breakdown of water into oxygen and hydrogen gas is going to be an example of that. And so if we take atoms or molecules and we combine them together to form a new compound, we call that a synthesis reaction. We're making something. Likewise, if we take a compound and break it down into atoms or molecules, we call that a decomposition reaction. Lots of times that'll generate a little bit of heat. And we can use both of these reactions in the chemistry lab to do simple stoichiometry and practice our lab techniques. And so synthesis reaction are when we're taking atoms and molecules and combining them together. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say we take magnesium, get it a little bit hot, and then allow it to combine with oxygen. It's going to make magnesium oxide. And so when it's done, you're going to have a new solid that's creating. We're taking a solid and a gas, and we're making a new solid out of it. Another example of a synthesis reaction could be the carbonation of water. And so this is me adding a little bit of carbon dioxide to my soda stream at home. And what's going to happen inside there is that the carbon dioxide is going to combine with the water and it's going to make carbonic acid. So that carbonic acid is going to lower the pH to around 4 and it's going to change the taste of that carbonated beverage. What's decomposition then? It's when we're taking a compound and breaking it down. So here's an example. If we take sodium azide and break it down into sodium metal and nitrogen gas, that'd be a decomposition reaction. So if we have one reactant and two products, it's a good idea that this is probably a decomposition reaction. Where's an example of this actual reaction? Well, this was used in early airbags. And so what you can do is you can put some sodium azide inside the bag right here. It's totally stable, but if you add a little bit of heat to it, so there's an igniter inside there, it's going to quickly break into sodium and nitrogen gas. And that nitrogen gas is going to fill up the bag really quickly. Now you could imagine a bunch of nitrogen in there is not a good thing. That's highly reactive as well. And so they also put chemicals in here that react with the sodium. Another example could be right here. I'm taking hydrogen peroxide and then I'm simply adding a catalyst to it. I'm adding an enzyme that's found in yeast. And so the yeast isn't part of the chemical reaction. It just serves as a catalyst. And so what I can do is I can add hydrogen peroxide to it, seal it up, and I can give it a little bit of a shake. And what it's going to do is it's going to break down into water, and then it's going to break down into oxygen. And that oxygen is going to fill up the bag. Now, if you feel the bottom of the bag, it's going to get warmer and warmer. And the reason why is that we're releasing energy as we break those bonds and form new bonds to the point where it can eventually explode. And so sometimes you have to let a little bit of that gas go. Scared me.
So the first reaction we're going to talk about is the synthesis reaction. These are sometimes called combination reactions. Now, synthesis is just a fancy word that means making, and that's exactly what happens in a synthesis reaction. A compound is made from simpler materials. Here's an example. Carbon comes together with oxygen gas to make carbon dioxide, CO2. What we make in this reaction is more complex than the two simple things that we start with. Here's another example. We take sodium and chlorine gas, Cl2, and that makes sodium chloride, NaCl. What we end up with is more complex than the simple things we started with. Now, a quick word about the equations that I'm using in this lesson. Some of these equations I'm going to be talking about, like this one right here, are unbalanced. So there might not be exactly the same number of atoms on both sides of the equation. Now, normally it's really important to balance equations, but when we're going to be learning about the different types of reactions, the balancing numbers can be a little bit distracting. So here, I just want you to focus on the elements and how they're rearranging or combining with each other in different ways. That being said, a synthesis reaction is one where we start with simple materials and put them together to make something more complex. If we want to represent a synthesis reaction more generally or more generically, we could say that it looks kind of like this. We have A and B combining to make AB. Here, A and B are different elements or they're different compounds coming together to make something more complex. So that's a synthesis reaction. Let's move on. A decomposition reaction is kind of the opposite of a synthesis reaction. In a synthesis reaction, we put things together. In a decomposition reaction, a compound is broken down into simpler compounds or all the way down to the elements that make it up. So in this example here, we have water, H2O, and it's breaking down into hydrogen and oxygen gas. These are the elements that make it up. Now, in a decomposition reaction, you don't have to break things down all the way down to their basic elements. You can also break them down just into simpler compounds. For example, here we have CaCO3, calcium carbonate, and that gets broken down to two simpler compounds, CaO and CO2. It's not like we're taking this and breaking it down into just calcium and just carbon and just oxygen, but still, because these are simpler compounds, it is also a decomposition reaction. So if we wanted to come up with sort of a generalized way to write a decomposition reaction, we could write it like this. AB breaking apart into A plus B, where AB is some kind of compound, and A and B are simpler compounds or elements. Okay,